Davie PhD's Jargon Busters, Episode 1, 23rd of September 2020. You may have been expecting PhD Qs, but we've suspended that feature for the time being. We're going to be jargon busting. If you watch the news, it's full of terms like GDP, OECD, IRM, IMF, ERM, and usually they are delivered by dour news presenters as bad news. What do all these terms actually mean? And is the news really as bad as it sounds? In these videos, I'm going to bust the jargon and explain these things in terms we all understand. I'll explain how these terms can be used to inform us and to frighten us. And I'm going to start with the big one, GDP. The official explanation, GDP, means Gross Domestic Product. It is a monetary measure of the market added value of all final goods and services produced in a specific time period. Sometimes you'll hear it broken down further. GDP nominal per capita. It doesn't reflect differences in the cost of living or interest or inflation rates in the countries spoken of. GDP per capita at purchasing power parity, or PPP, is arguably more useful when comparing living standards between nations. But nominal GDP is more useful when we're comparing national economies on the international stage. And it's the one you hear referred to on the TV news. The Davie PhD explanation. Okay, I'll use a home-related example. Let's say you earn a take-home wage of £500 per week. Your living costs are £200 a week, and after that you're left with £300. It looks like you have a home GDP of £300, right? Well, not quite. Let's take another look at the £200 living expenses first. As long as you're paying them to a UK-owned company, and their profit would count as part of your home GDP. If not, it wouldn't. So if you paid £100 rent to a UK private landlord, and they make £20 profit, the profit they make contributes to your home GDP. And if your gas and electric are from UK suppliers, then their profits could also get added. If not, it doesn't. Let's say you pay them each £20 and they each make £10 profit. Then that's another £20 added to your home GDP. Any shopping as part of your living expenses would also count, as long as it was done with a UK-owned shop. So again, let's say you spend £40 on shopping and the shop makes £20 profit. That's also added to your home GDP. So far, you've added £60 to your home GDP of £300, so it's £360. The remaining £20 from your living expenses goes on council tax, but taxes don't count, and so wouldn't contribute to your home GDP. So now your living expenses have already contributed £60 to your home GDP, and you've still got £300 to spend. Any money you spend in the community adds to that home GDP. So if you spent £10 in a shop one day, that £10 would be added. But now it starts to get a little bit complicated. If the shopkeeper makes £5 profit from your £10, and he then takes that £5 and spends it in the community, you can add that £5. If that £5 generates, say, £2.50 profit in the next shop, it gets added again, and the cycle goes on. So what you can see is that you may have £300 or £360 of home GDP, but your money can get spent 3 or 4 times and get added every single time. But as soon as money is saved or banked, it is still there, but it stops your home GDP from growing. So my summary is kind of like this. If someone lives their lives paycheck to paycheck, spending most of their money, they'll grow the GDP. Someone who saves does not grow GDP as much as someone who spends. So it could be argued that it's sensible to save, but patriotic to spend. Hence governments try to get people out to spend, to get them out of financial trouble. Because if you choose to save your money, it doesn't help governments. If you expand that concept from household individuals to every company in a nation, then you have a nation's GDP. So when I see a GDP figure quoted, what does it tell me? Well, A nation with a high GDP per capita is attractive for business and inward investment, which in turn means jobs and prosperity. More people in jobs and more businesses means the government gets more in taxes, and the country becomes more prosperous. Sounds great, right? But it also means, generally, that individuals in that country are spending and are also in debt. So while the position of high spending and high GDP is desirable for a government, it's also precarious, as the whole world found out in the 2009 financial crash. So how could this information be used to deceive you? Well, it can be used to do just that. You see, profits earned by companies contribute to national GDP, but it could also be abused to show that a geographic area, for example, like Scotland, has a smaller GDP than it actually does. Scotland has 8.4% of the UK's population, but if you look at our GDP as far as the UK government is concerned, it's around 8% of the UK total. So anyone looking at that figure would think that Scotland is being out-earned by the rest of the UK. But these figures are based on where a business is headquartered, not the location where the money is spent. So just using the example of supermarkets, in my hometown I have Asda, Morrison's, Home Bargains. Lots of locally earned pounds are spent there, but they are not counted as Scottish GDP. In fact, it falls to Lidl and Aldi, who have Scottish limited companies running their stores in Scotland, to contribute to the Scottish side of the balance sheet. So accounting tricks like that are often used to make it look like a country is poorer than it actually is. Well folks, that's it for GDP. If there's another 3, 4 or even 5 letter abbreviation driving you nuts, let me know and I'll bust it. Otherwise, I'd ask all of you to comment on the Facebook page, play nicely. Unionists are welcome here, as are their dissenting opinions, as long as they play nicely too. Davie PhD.